Hi! Today we're going to tell you the story of how one woman faced unexpected temptations and desires that awakened long forgotten feelings within her. This is a story about how love and passion can lead us down a complicated path full of uncertainty and choices between loyalty and temptation, comfort and the unknown. But before you get comfortable, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's really interesting to see who has joined us. Now, sit back and relax. We're starting. The morning sun filtered through gauzy white curtains, casting soft golden light across the pale wooden floors. Claire moved silently through the kitchen, her bare feet barely making a sound. The hum of the coffee machine filled the air, accompanied by the distant buzz of cicadas outside. Everything looked perfect, neat, peaceful, domestic. She was 38 years old, tall and slender, with a natural elegance that came not from effort, but from quiet resignation. Her long chestnut hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her eyes held the distant, melancholy look of someone who had been still for too long. Thomas, her husband of 15 years, sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, eyes glued to architectural renderings. He wore a crisp shirt and glasses that gave him a sharp, intelligent look. He was handsome in a classic way, with the kind of confidence that came from being successful and always in control. Claire placed a cup of black coffee beside him. He barely looked up. "Thanks," he murmured, eyes still scanning the screen. Claire smiled politely and sat across from him, sipping her own coffee. There was no tension between them, only a smooth, practiced rhythm. The same words, the same gestures, the same comfortable silence. A marriage not broken, but frozen. Outside, the low rumble of a pickup truck pulling into the driveway broke the stillness. Claire glanced toward the window, already knowing who it was. Jason. He was 22, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-kissed skin and tousled dark hair. A college student working part-time through the summer, Jason had been hired to tend to their garden, landscaping, trimming hedges, and maintaining the lawn. It had started as a simple arrangement. Now it felt like something else. Claire watched as he stepped out of the truck, dressed in a sleeveless shirt and worn jeans. She caught herself staring at the way his muscles flexed as he reached for his tools. She looked away quickly, but the image stayed. After breakfast, Thomas packed his briefcase and leaned in to kiss her cheek. "I'll be home late again. Don't wait up." She nodded. "Have a good day." The front door closed behind him. The silence that followed was different, heavier. Claire stood at the window, watching Jason work. He was raking leaves near the edge of the garden, moving with easy confidence. She felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Not love, not even desire, just aliveness. She opened the sliding glass door and stepped outside. The heat wrapped around her like a second skin. Jason looked up and smiled. "Morning, Mrs. Walker?" "Claire," she corrected gently, her tone casual. He wiped sweat from his brow and set the rake aside. "Everything all right?" She nodded. "Would you like some water?" "Sure, that'd be great." She returned a minute later with a cold bottle. Their fingers brushed as she handed it to him. A brief, electric touch. He held her gaze just a little too long. Or maybe she imagined it. Either way, the air felt heavier. Jason took a sip and leaned against the fence, his shirt clinging to his chest. Claire stood a few feet away, pretending not to watch him. "You've done a great job with the roses," she said softly. "Thanks. I like working here. Peaceful." She nodded. "Yes, it is." He looked at her then. Really looked. "You seem lonely sometimes." Her breath caught. She gave a soft laugh, trying to deflect the weight of his words. "Do I?" Jason said nothing. The silence between them stretched. Not awkward, but charged. Then he looked away and picked up the rake. "I should finish the back hedges." Claire watched him walk away, heart pounding. Later that afternoon, she stood in the upstairs hallway, folding towels by the open window. Below, Jason was hosing down the garden path. Water glistened on his bare arms. She lingered longer than necessary, hidden by the curtain, her mind swirling with questions she had no answer to. Was she really that lonely? Or had she simply forgotten how it felt to be seen? That night, as she lay beside Thomas, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, her thoughts wandered. Not to guilt, but to heat, to glances, to unsaid words that hung between her and the boy in the garden. And for the first time in years, she dreamt vividly of sun, water, and the rake falling to the grass. Claire adjusted the strap of her sundress as she stepped onto the porch, her skin already tingling from the growing warmth of the afternoon. The scent of cut grass drifted from the backyard, mingling with the faint aroma of lilacs. She stood there for a moment, hesitating, before finally descending the wooden steps. Jason was back again, raking along the side of the house this time, earbuds in, his body moving rhythmically to some private beat. She had not planned to come out, not really. But something about the silence inside the house had made her restless. Or maybe it was the heat. Or the way Jason had looked at her the day before. That flicker of something between them had lingered in her thoughts long after the moment passed. She walked toward him slowly. Jason noticed her approaching and pulled out one of his earbuds. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Everything okay?" Claire gave a small nod. "Just needed some air. It's stifling inside." He set the rake against the wall and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You want me to trim those hedges near the patio today?" She shrugged. "Only if you feel like it. Honestly, it already looks better than it has in years." Jason glanced at her then, more directly this time, his gaze pausing on the exposed curve of her shoulder, the smooth line of her collarbone. She noticed, and she did not look away. "I like working here," he said after a pause. "It's not just the yard. It's peaceful." Claire gave a small, dry laugh. "That's what everyone says. But peaceful can start to feel like silence, and silence isn't always comfort." Jason tilted his head, watching her. "You get lonely?" She met his eyes, surprised by his bluntness. "Don't you?" He smiled, not answering. She realized then that he was no longer just a boy to her, not a student with summer work, but a man who had been watching her with quiet intensity. "Come sit a second," she said, motioning toward the shaded patio. He followed without hesitation. They sat side by side on the wooden bench. For a moment, neither spoke. The cicadas buzzed in the trees, and a light breeze stirred the hem of her dress. Claire tucked one leg beneath her and turned slightly toward him. "You ever fall for the wrong person?" she asked, not entirely sure why the words had come out. Jason leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. You mean someone you can't have? He glanced at her. Or someone you shouldn't? She didn't answer. The silence that followed said enough. I have, he added quietly. Once. Claire swallowed, feeling heat rise in her throat. What happened? Jason looked down at his hands. Nothing. We pretended nothing was there. She left. I stayed. Claire breathed out slowly, trying to calm the rush inside her chest. Smart, she whispered. Doesn't mean it hurt any less, he replied. They sat like that for a long while, words unspoken hanging thick in the air. Then Claire stood, brushing invisible dust from her dress. I should go check on lunch. Jason nodded but didn't move. Claire. She froze at the sound of her name, the way he said it. No longer polite, no longer distant. Yeah. He looked up at her. You're not invisible. I see you. Her heart gave a jolt. She turned without replying and walked back inside, hands trembling slightly. The house felt colder than before, darker despite the sunlight. She stood in the kitchen, fingers gripping the counter, wondering how far she was willing to go to feel alive again. Later that day, Lila arrived, her closest friend, loud and free in ways Claire had never been. Lila breezed into the kitchen in a swirl of perfume and laughter. Her short blonde hair tousled, sunglasses perched atop her head. You look like you haven't been touched in months, Lila teased, eyeing her. And not in a good way. Claire smiled faintly. That obvious? Lila poured herself wine without asking. Honey, it's obvious from space. You need to do something about it. Claire hesitated, then spoke. There's a guy. It's complicated. Lila grinned. Now we're getting somewhere. He works here. He's young. Too young. Young doesn't mean stupid, Lila said, taking a long sip. And complicated. That's just code for interesting. Claire shook her head. It's wrong. I'm married. To a man who treats you like furniture, Lila shot back. I'm not saying go sleep with him. I'm saying let yourself feel something. Start there. They sat in silence for a while, sipping wine. Outside, Jason passed by the kitchen window, shirt off now, sweat gleaming on his skin. Lila raised an eyebrow. Is that him? Claire nodded, unable to speak. Lila gave a low whistle. Girl, you're in trouble. That evening, Claire sat alone on the edge of the bathtub, brushing her hair slowly. Her reflection in the mirror looked the same as always. Neat, elegant, composed. But her body felt different, electric and restless. Jason had looked at her like she mattered. And that terrified her more than anything else. The morning sky was streaked with pale orange as Claire stood at the sink, rinsing a single coffee cup. She had barely slept. Her thoughts had been tangled all night. Images of Jason's voice, his eyes, the warmth of his body under the sun. She hated how her skin reacted to those memories, hated that her heart quickened not at the sound of her husband's footsteps, but at the thought of a young man who worked with his hands. Tom had already left for the day. Another meeting in the city, another excuse to be gone. The house felt cavernous without him. Yet it had felt no fuller when he was there. She wandered into the living room and stood at the window, already knowing what she would see. Jason's truck. It was early, earlier than usual. He was unloading bags of mulch from the back, wearing a sleeveless shirt and loose-fitting work pants that hung low on his hips. Claire bit her lip, irritated with herself. She was a grown woman, a wife, but something about Jason's presence made her feel as though she had slipped out of her own skin and stepped into someone else's life. She opened the sliding door. "You're here early," she said casually. He looked up and smiled. "Cooler in the morning. Easier to work before the sun hits." Claire nodded, folding her arms across her chest. "Would you like something to drink?" He hesitated. "Sure. Water would be great." This time, when she returned with the bottle, she didn't just hand it to him and walk away. She stayed. Jason set down the mulch and took the bottle, their fingers brushing again. And this time, neither of them pulled back right away. "Thanks," he said quietly. Claire looked up at him, searching his face. "Do you always look at women like that?" Jason's eyes darkened. "Like what?" "Like they're more than they believe themselves to be." He stepped closer. "Only when they are." The words hit her like a warm breeze. She took a breath, the air catching in her throat. "You don't know anything about me." Jason tilted his head. "I know you're unhappy." Claire felt the blood rush to her cheeks. "That's none of your business." "Maybe not," he said, voice low. "But I see it anyway." The silence between them grew heavier. "I should get back to work," he added, but didn't move. Claire turned, almost against her own will, and walked back into the house, leaving the door open behind her. That afternoon, the temperature soared. By 2 o'clock, the garden shimmered in the heat. Jason had taken off his shirt completely, his skin bronzed and glistening. Claire watched from the kitchen, her fingers wrapped around a glass of lemonade she had no interest in drinking. Her pulse was quick and erratic. This was dangerous, ridiculous, yet every part of her ached with want. Not just for his body, but for the idea of being wanted. Then the doorbell rang. Claire jumped, nearly spilling the lemonade. She composed herself before answering. It was Marcus, Tom's old friend, unexpected and out of place. A tall, charming man in his early 40s, with a sharp smile and a habit of appearing when least convenient. "Claire," he said warmly, holding a bottle of wine. "Thought I'd drop this off for Tom. Is he around?" "No," she replied quickly. "He's at work. Probably won't be back until late." Marcus looked past her into the house. "Mind if I come in?" She hesitated. "Of course not." They settled in the living room, the wine unopened on the counter. Claire tried to stay calm, but Jason's presence just outside the window made it hard. Marcus noticed. "You've got a new gardener," he said casually, watching Jason move across the yard. "Yes, Jason. He's been here all summer." Marcus turned to her, his smile shifting. "You seem distracted." Claire looked away. "It's just hot." "Maybe. Or maybe something's changed around here." She forced a smile. "You always did enjoy reading between lines that weren't there." He chuckled. "Maybe. But I know the look of someone tempted." Claire froze. Marcus stood. "I should go. Tell Tom I stopped by." He left without another word, but the weight of his gaze lingered even after the door closed. Later, as the sun dipped low, Claire stepped outside again. Jason was gathering tools. his shirt slung over his shoulder. The garden glowed gold in the dying light. "Do you want to come in and wash up?" she asked before she could stop herself. "The sink's free." Jason paused, then nodded. "Thanks." Inside, Claire handed him a towel and gestured toward the kitchen. He moved toward the sink, rinsing his hands and arms, water dripping slowly down his forearms. Claire stood behind him, watching his reflection in the glass. The heat in the room was unbearable. Or maybe it was just her. He turned. "You okay?" he asked. Claire stepped closer. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think I am." Jason's hand moved to her waist, tentative at first. When she didn't pull away, he drew her closer. Her breath hitched, their faces inches apart. "You sure?" he whispered. She answered not with words, but by closing the space between them. The kiss was slow, uncertain. Not a rush of passion, but a question posed and answered with lips and breath and touch. Her hands slid up his back, his fingers tangled in her hair. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Claire stepped back, trembling. "You should go." Jason nodded, voice hoarse. "I know." He picked up his things and left through the back, not looking back. Claire stood alone in the kitchen, heart pounding, the ghost of his mouth still lingering on hers. She had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. The next day passed in a haze of guilt and anticipation. Claire could hardly focus on anything, as her thoughts kept drifting back to the kiss. The feel of Jason's lips, the roughness of his hands, the electric tension between them. It was a fleeting moment, a single act of weakness. But it had changed everything. She spent the morning cleaning the house, her movements mechanical. Every time she passed a window, she glanced toward the garden, half expecting Jason to appear, to knock on the door and finish what they had started. But he didn't. By noon, she could no longer ignore the tension building in her chest. She hadn't heard from him since last night. He hadn't sent a text or even made eye contact. The silence felt deafening, almost accusatory. She knew she had crossed a line, but part of her still craved the risk, the excitement of the unknown. The other part of her was consumed by shame. In the early afternoon, the doorbell rang. Claire hesitated, wiping her hands on a dish towel before heading toward the door. She was still rattled, unsettled by everything that had happened. But when she opened the door, it wasn't Jason standing on the other side. It was Tom's friend, Marcus, again. "Claire," he said, a slight grin on his face as he stepped into the doorway. "I thought I'd check in on you. Tom mentioned he'd be working late today." She forced a smile. "It's been quiet. How are you?" "Good. Good," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the interior of the house before landing on her. "I was just thinking about what we talked about the other day." Claire's stomach tightened. She knew exactly what he meant. His cryptic reference to temptation. She didn't want to revisit that conversation, but she also couldn't find the words to push him away. "You mentioned seeing something in me," Claire said slowly, trying to play it off. "I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus." "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice suddenly low. He stepped closer. "I can see it in your eyes. You're restless, and you're not blind to what's going on in this house. I've been around long enough to know when things are out of balance. Claire felt the heat rise in her cheeks, her breath quickening. She tried to step back, but Marcus was too close, his presence too overwhelming. The tension between them was thick, and she realized, with growing unease, that she didn't know how to make him leave. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. His smile faded, and he leaned in, his breath warm against her neck. "I want you to stop pretending that you're happy. Stop pretending you don't see what's been happening. You and I both know you're craving more than your husband can give you. You've been giving all of yourself to a man who doesn't even notice you anymore. It's time for you to wake up." She shook her head, pushing him away gently. "Stop it. This is wrong. I'm married, Marcus." "And you're miserable," he replied bluntly. "I'm not trying to pressure you. I'm just saying, if you ever decide to stop pretending you know where I am." Before she could say another word, Marcus turned and walked toward the door. But not before he shot her one last look. A knowing look, as if he had seen her secrets long before she had. Claire shut the door behind him, her heart pounding in her chest. She was conflicted, lost in a whirlwind of emotions. She wasn't sure if she was more angry at herself for what had happened with Jason, or at Marcus for pushing her so close to the edge. Both of them were complicating her already fractured life. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She tried to stay busy, but the weight of her thoughts was too much to bear. The clock seemed to tick louder with every passing second. She couldn't avoid it any longer. She needed to confront Jason. She needed to figure out where things stood between them, and whether the brief, heated moment they shared had been just a fleeting lapse in judgment. The evening stretched out painfully. When the sun finally dipped behind the trees, Claire stepped outside once again, her heart racing. She had told herself she wouldn't do this, wouldn't let herself be pulled back into this dangerous web. But here she was, walking toward the garden, searching for him. Jason was there, as usual, working near the fence. His shirt was back on, but the familiar way he moved made her breath catch. When he looked up and saw her approaching, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or wariness. He didn't know what to expect from her. "Claire," he said quietly, wiping his hands on a towel as she stopped in front of a hem. "I need to talk to you," she said, trying to steady her voice. "About what happened yesterday." Jason looked at her, expression unreadable. "We don't have to talk about it," he said, his voice low, but there was an edge to it now, something darker than before. "No," she insisted. "We do." He stepped back, his gaze dropping to the ground. "What do you want me to say, Claire? That it was a mistake?" "It wasn't. It was something we both wanted." She felt a sharp pang of guilt. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It's just, everything's been so messed up. My marriage, my life. I'm so lost." Jason took a slow breath, his eyes meeting hers again. "You're not the only one who feels that way." Claire swallowed. "What does that mean?" Jason's jaw tightened, his voice dropping even lower. "It means I'm not just some distraction for you, Claire. I'm not here to fix what's broken in your life. If you want me, it has to be because you want me, not because you're running away from something else." The truth of his words hit her like a punch. She had been hiding from the truth for so long, and now here it was, laid bare before her. She had wanted the escape, The feeling of being seen, of being wanted. But she had never stopped to consider what it meant for him, or for her. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Jason stepped forward, his hand brushing her cheek, and for a moment, everything felt still. "You don't have to decide right now," he said gently. "But don't let your guilt keep you from living. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's about what you feel." Claire closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was pretending anymore. But the consequences of this moment would follow her, no matter what path she chose. The air was thick with humidity as Claire stood at the edge of the porch, her eyes scanning the yard. Jason's truck was gone. She hadn't seen him since that moment by the fence. The moment when everything she had been denying came to the surface. The moment when she had allowed herself to finally admit what she had been running from. It was over. Or, at least, it should have been. But it wasn't. She felt it in her bones. The heaviness in the pit of her stomach. The ache that refused to go away. The uncertainty of what to do next. Her life had already been complicated, fractured by years of living in the shadow of a marriage that had quietly deteriorated. Now it felt like everything was beginning to crumble. The phone on the kitchen counter buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Marcus. "We need to talk." She didn't know why, but she responded almost instantly. "What about?" The reply came quickly. "You know." The words were simple, but they hit her with the force of a storm. She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling slightly as she put the phone back down. Marcus had seen too much. He had always been an observer, a man who could sense when things were shifting, when secrets were starting to slip through the cracks. Claire walked into the living room and sank into the couch, feeling the weight of the silence settle around her. The house seemed colder now. Tom's absence felt louder, somehow more palpable. He wasn't here. Not physically, and he certainly wasn't here emotionally. He had never been the kind of man who demanded attention, and over time, she had become accustomed to that. It was easier to exist in a marriage where expectations were low, where nothing ever really changed. But now, everything felt different. The lines she had drawn to keep herself safe had been crossed. By Jason, by Marcus, and by her own hands. She had let it happen. Let them see her. Let them touch her. The phone buzzed again, this time with a call. Marcus. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Claire," he said, his tone smooth and calculated. "We need to have a serious conversation." She closed her eyes for a moment. "About what?" "You know exactly what about," he replied, his voice tinged with something darker now. "About what you're doing with Jason. About what's happening to you." Claire's heart skipped. She hadn't realized how much she had been hoping he would leave her alone. But here he was again, drawing her back into the mess she had been trying to avoid. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, feigning innocence, even though she knew better. "Don't play coy with me, Claire," Marcus replied. "I know what's going on between you and that kid. And it's only a matter of time before Tom finds out." Her throat tightened. "Please don't say anything." Marcus let out a slow breath, almost as if savoring the moment. "You can't keep hiding this. You can't keep pretending that everything's fine. You want something more than what Tom's giving you, don't you?" The words hung in the air, filling the space between them. Claire sat back against the couch, her mind racing. She had always kept up appearances, always played the part of the dutiful wife, the perfect hostess, the woman who had it all under control. But now, it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers, like a web unraveling piece by piece. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "What do you want from me?" There was a pause before Marcus responded. "I want you to admit the truth to yourself. Admit that you're not happy, that you haven't been for a long time. Admit that you're looking for something else. And maybe I could be what you need." Her heart pounded in her chest as his words sank in. Part of her wanted to reject him, to hang up and pretend this never happened. But the other part of her, the part that had been hidden away for so long, felt drawn to him. He was offering her the freedom she had been too afraid to take. "I'm not like you, Marcus," she whispered. "I'm not that person." "You don't have to be anyone else, Claire," he said softly. "You just need to stop pretending." The line went silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, his tone turning colder. "But if you don't make a choice soon, there won't be a way out. Tom's going to find out sooner or later. And when he does, you won't be able to hide behind your perfect little life anymore." She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of his words like a heavy stone in her chest. Marcus was right. It wasn't just about Jason anymore. It wasn't even about what had happened between them. It was about the truth she had been running from. The truth about herself, her marriage, and the life she had built on a foundation of lies. She hung up the phone without saying another word, her mind whirling. She couldn't keep pretending. She couldn't keep living in this state of limbo, torn between her past and her desires. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to face the consequences of her actions. The evening arrived slowly, the sky deepening into a twilight blue. Claire had no idea what to do with herself. The house felt like a prison, its walls closing in around her. She couldn't keep running from what had happened, from the undeniable fact that she had crossed a line. But she wasn't ready to confront Tom either. Not yet. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. The woman who stared back at her looked tired, worn out, and unsure of what she wanted. Her eyes were darker than usual, filled with a kind of sadness she hadn't seen in years. She ran a hand through her hair, letting out a shaky breath. What had she become? The doorbell rang again, startling her out of her thoughts. This time, when she opened the door, it wasn't Marcus or Jason. It was Tom. "Hey," he said, offering her a half smile. "Sorry I'm late. Work ran over." She nodded, her throat tight. He looked the same as always. Handsome, composed, but distant. He didn't know. He didn't have a clue. "How was your day?" she asked, trying to sound normal. "Busy," he replied, stepping inside. He didn't notice the tension in her posture, the unease in her voice. "Have you eaten?" "Not yet." "I'll make dinner. Let's just keep it simple tonight," he said, already heading toward the kitchen. Claire watched him for a moment, her heart heavy with guilt. He was still the man she had married, still the man who had provided for her, protected her, even if she hadn't felt seen in years. And yet, she had done this. She had sought out something else, something forbidden. She closed her eyes. trying to ignore the growing ache in her chest. This wasn't just about Jason. It wasn't just about Marcus. This was about her, about the choices she had made. And she had no idea where they would lead. As Tom busied himself in the kitchen, Claire took a deep breath and walked over to the window, looking out at the fading light. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that, for better or for worse, her life had already started to unravel, and there was no way to put it all back together. The evening dragged on, slow and suffocating, like the heavy weight of the unspoken truths hanging between them. Claire sat at the table, staring at the plate in front of her, the food untouched. Tom hummed softly as he cooked, the familiar sound of his presence, oddly comforting, yet unbearably distant. She watched him, trying to remember when they had last shared a moment of connection that felt real. Not just polite conversations or perfunctory touches, but something that made her heart feel alive. Tom set the plates down, and they ate in silence. Claire had never been good at making small talk, and right now, every word felt like a lie. She could barely concentrate, her thoughts scattered in 1,000 different directions. To Jason, to Marcus, to the ever-growing void between her and Tom. She had crossed a line, but crossing it didn't seem to make her feel free. It only left her feeling more trapped, like a woman split between two worlds, neither of which offered her peace. Tom's voice broke through her haze. "You okay?" Claire blinked, focusing on his face. He was watching her with that quiet, knowing gaze. The same look he'd given her over the years whenever he noticed something was off. But it never went beyond the surface. He knew something was wrong, but he never pushed. "I'm fine," she lied, her smile coming out thin and forced. Tom looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking a lot about us, Claire, about what's been going on." She froze, the fork halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" He set down his own fork and leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "We've been distant, and I've noticed it. You've been distant too. I don't know if it's just me or if it's something else." Her heart pounded in her chest. Was this it? Was this the moment he was going to confront her about what had happened? Or was he just going to continue pretending, as he always did, and let things continue to fester in the background? "I don't know what you mean," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. She had always been good at hiding behind walls, building them up so high that no one could reach her. "Claire." Tom's voice softened, but there was an edge to it. "I'm not stupid. I see the way you've been. I see the way you've been looking at me, at everything. It's like you're waiting for something." She felt the breath leave her body, like she was caught in a lie she couldn't escape. "I'm just tired, Tom. That's all. It's been a long week." He stared at her for a long moment, his lips pressed together as if considering something. Finally, he sighed and stood up, walking over to the counter. He didn't push further. He just let the moment hang between them, thick with tension. When he returned to the table, he set his glass down and looked at her again, more gently this time. "I'm not perfect, Claire. I know I've been absent. I've been caught up in my work and everything else. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want us to be like this. I know it's not easy, but I'm willing to try." Claire's heart twisted. She should have felt relief, but all she could feel was guilt. Guilt that Tom, who had always been patient and understanding, was still holding on to something that was slipping away from both of them. She hadn't given him any reason to believe that she wanted this marriage to continue. "You don't need to try, Tom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not about trying." He frowned, confused. "Then what is it about? You've been pulling away from me for months now. I don't know what's going on with you." She closed her eyes, unable to look at him any longer. It was too much. The weight of everything that had happened, everything she had done, felt suffocating. "I don't know what's wrong," she admitted. "But it's not you, it's me." Tom reached out and placed his hand on hers. "We can fix this, Claire. Whatever it is, we can work through it." But the truth was, Claire wasn't sure anymore if she even wanted to try. She wasn't sure if she could go back to the life she had before. The life where everything was safe and predictable. Where the biggest conflict was what to have for dinner. She had tasted something else now. Something forbidden. Something that had made her feel alive again. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about herself. And it wasn't just Jason. It was the way he had looked at her. The way he had seen her, not as a wife, not as someone's mother, but as herself. As a woman with desires, with needs. A woman who could be seen and wanted. And now Marcus's voice echoed in her mind. "You want something more than what Tom's giving you." Claire sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of her thoughts. Tom's hand was still on hers, but it felt distant now, like he was holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. "I don't know if I can be what you need anymore, Tom," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I'm even the person I was when we got married." Tom's face fell, and she could see the hurt in his eyes. But he didn't say anything. He didn't ask her what was wrong or why. He just let her speak her truth. A truth she had been afraid to face for too long. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the fading light. The day had slipped away, and with it, the last remnants of her certainty. The path ahead of her seemed unclear, fogged by the choices she had already made and the choices she had yet to make. "I'm sorry," she whispered to no one in particular. "I don't know what to do anymore." There was a long silence before Tom stood and walked toward her. He didn't touch her, didn't try to hold her. He simply stood beside her, watching the world outside. The house, once filled with promises and expectations, now felt like a place she didn't belong. "I don't know what to do either," he said finally, his voice thick with sadness. "But I do know this, Claire. You're not alone in this, and I don't want to be alone in it either." She turned her face toward him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't want you to be alone either," she said, her voice shaking. "But I think we've already been alone for a long time." Claire stared out at the darkening horizon, the sound of Tom's breath filling the space between them. She didn't know where the road ahead would lead, but she knew she couldn't go back. And she couldn't keep going forward with the same lies, with the same empty promises. She had to choose. The choice lay before her. Continue the marriage that had been suffocating her for so long, or take the risk and face the unknown, with all its consequences. She didn't know which path would be the right one, but in that moment, she understood something important. She would have to face the consequences, no matter what. And whatever came next, it would be hers to bear.